Now, the COVID-19 pandemic and all the social and economic disruptions it's brought to people's daily lives have made us all the more aware of the need to address problems like social justice, climate change, the digital divide, ending homelessness, and other critical issues in the places we live. As the world looks ahead to a post-pandemic era, efforts around smart cities can be expected to accelerate, making daily life more digital and sustainable in the future. Last month, South Korea's President Moon Jae-in announced an $8.8 billion plan to launch South Korea's smart city project nationwide by 2025. Also, US President-elect Joe Biden's administration is expected to boost green infrastructure, crowd analytics, smart grids, and other technology-driven markets over the next 4 years. Today, we discuss what smart cities are exactly and how our lives might look in these settlements in the post-COVID world. I'm joined by Andrew Lim, Trade Commissioner at the Quebec Government Office in Seoul, who is formerly part of the World Smart Sustainable Cities Organisation, and Dr. Graham Ong-Webb, Adjunct Fellow at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies at Singapore's Nanyang University. It's great to see you both. Thank you for joining us. Well, let's start with you, Mr. Lim. Now, smart cities, it's been quite a buzzword in Korea and around the world for quite a time now. And, well, could you start by telling us what smart cities are exactly?
Yes, in smart city, there has been a lot of, definitions thrown around. But in general, we kind of sum it up by saying a smart city is a city that uses technology or ICT to provide services and solve urban challenges. A smart city does things like improve transportation, accessibility, social services, promote sustainability, and usually give its citizens more of a voice. Or to be more exact, World Bank defines it as a city that plans and manages its core functions by effectively using data and digital technology to become efficient, innovative, inclusive, and resilient. That's basically what smart city is these days.
And Dr. Ong-Webb, now Singapore has been ranked as the world's smartest city for 2 straight years. What really sets it apart from other examples of smart cities around the world?
Well, among other things, I think Singapore has been able to achieve a very decent ranking on the world stage because it started its Smart Cities initiative very early on. We established our Smart Nations office within the Singapore government ecosystem as early as 2014. And some of that work preceded also the establishment of the office. So in a nutshell, I think starting early and getting a sense of what is required to build a smart city or smart cities if you live in larger geographies, countries with several states or provinces, I think that's key. One of the reasons I can mention why that would be important would be because of some of the built-in infrastructure which you would have to sort of adapt and update, repurpose to make it smart. And so there's some advantages and disadvantages clearly in countries that start early, work with older infrastructure, and countries that start a little bit late but are able to build smart cities from the ground up and perhaps put in those new technologies right from the get-go.
And Mr. Lim, as smart cities have been around for quite some time now, what do you think are some of the best practices and projects around the world, including where you're from, Canada, Quebec to be specific?
Well, I'll start with Seoul. Korea as a nation. I mean, Korea has done a lot in terms of smart cities, and it's well known for ICT, etc., and it is a core component of smart cities. So, for example, I'll give you one really, exemplary case that the world's been really taking a lot of benchmark on. For example, there's a system called Bus Management System. I think some people are familiar. This BMS is an integrated control center that can monitor the whole entire system, bus traffic, all those things in real time. And this control center, which is located in one area, it gathers all the information on vehicle positioning, the location and speed, which in turn is communicated to the information service panel at the bus stops and via various applications to passengers through apps and their mobile phones and their internet. And this allows the citizens to kind of plan their route, plan their schedule so that they know exactly when the buses come. And above that, Korea also implemented a system where they used digital currency to get on buses or the public transportation. Singapore also has this as well. And with this information, they could kind of get an estimate of how many people are on the subway or more importantly, the buses, so that it shows through the apps and the LCD panels on the bus stations how full the bus is, which allows the citizens to make informed decisions so they kind of sort of say alleviate overcrowding. If it's too crowded, they could see it on their app and the information, and they would maybe take an alternate route like subway or an alternate destination.
Hi, I'm Mr. Lim. With the COVID-19 pandemic, how has this really impacted the trend and the work of smart cities? I mean, we've seen a lot of services, the way people live, going digital. How is this contactless phenomenon having, what kind of impact is it having on smart cities?
So especially for Korea, I think a lot of people imagine smart cities in Korea, it had a lot of the software component, but a lot of it was about hardware infrastructure, lampposts, IoT sensors, etc. And you could probably imagine with the COVID-19 situation, a lot of the budget or some of the budget was kind of transferred to more emergency services, hiring contact tracers, etc., etc. So there has been some setback and delays. But however, with the acceleration of digitization of work, from Zoom to online conferences, smart cities has played a role as a lot of the infrastructure that was originally put in forth for other uses, such as automated vehicle, 5G, that actually started getting used for COVID situations. I mean, for example, Korea has a highly integrated CCTV system, which, as I mentioned before, is kind of part of the BMS system. And they use this to kind of try to alleviate privacy issues, yet still be able to kind of trace the people to see which restaurants they went, etc., and have that information out there through Seoul Smart City Emergency Response System, and then get the citizens to know where and where not to go. So they use this kind of a transparency, so to say, which is kind of somewhat key in smart cities because data is the biggest thing here. So that's one of the, I guess, the biggest changes from kind of hardware to software, from more disease fighting, I guess, initiatives.
Right, so in order to make cities really sustainable and smart, you need all this hardware, but also you need to develop software to make it truly inclusive and really sustainable for the people. And Dr. Ong Webb, what do you think authorities need to really consider in order to make smart cities really inclusive of all social groups and make sure that there's no more digital divide, to really narrow that gap so that no one is left behind?
That's a good question. Well, I think there are quite a few things that governments around the world that are striving to make their cities smart, to actually transcend this digital divide, which would otherwise, polarize societies and end up with a situation where there are haves and have-nots when it comes to embracing emerging future technologies that can unlock a lot of possibilities for societies. One of the key things I think starts with really education. So leveling people across the demographic. And what I mean by this is actually particularly targeting our senior citizens who would be less familiar, less comfortable with a host of digital technologies, even beginning with the use of a smartphone and accessing mobile applications on the smartphone and other applications as well, all through this educational initiative. It's slightly easier with the schools because in Singapore, we've started making the knowledge about technology and digital applications compulsory, so to speak, in terms of the school curriculum. And so children naturally imbibe this because it's part of the school syllabus. I think all in all, education is a great leveler. The other thing I must mention also is trying to alleviate costs of these technologies on those who otherwise couldn't afford them. Actually, a very good example of this is one of our health initiatives nationwide, run by the Health Promotion Board, which is a government health agency. And they've kicked off a population health study. And what they've done is actually use that platform to provide free smart wearables to all citizens who participate, right? With the catch that they have to wear the smart wearable for 2 years. They're supposed to download a free application to work with the smart wearable, to monitor their heart rate and monitor their physical activity. And so it's a win-win, really. Government gets more data, which is the key currency in the smart city to do things more effectively and efficiently, etc. And on the populational side, actually, you are able to adopt this kind of technology society-wide, right, without having to really fork out all too much money.
The more connected devices a smart city employs or they really deploy, the greater the risk to individual privacy. Do highly connected cities leave us that much more vulnerable to attack? I mean, if we're sharing data all the time, and what would you say are some solutions?
No, definitely. I mean, this is a big concern because with the expansion of the Internet of Things space, the IoT world, essentially, we're talking about billions and billions of devices that we're going to see connected through information and communications technology. These devices will also have a fair bit of intelligence. Some of them will have edge computing capabilities. And so a lot of data, a lot of analytics is going to be churned out. And data will be piped through across this larger network. Threat exposure is a lot larger. And of course, on the government end, on the end of private enterprises working in partnership with the public sector, they're going to have to work out more resilient cybersecurity setups, right, with more encryption, and other features and layers of security to ensure that breaches are going to be a lot less. They will not be zero, of course, in terms of their occurrence, but the probability of that needs to be mitigated. I think one of the simplest, most powerful things actually to really make smart cities more secure really comes down to the individual again. And various consultancies have actually pointed to this. And it doesn't have to be expensive. It's all about focusing on the protection of the individual identities, for example, from scams and hacks that otherwise would lead to the sort of the spread of their personal data. The other thing was also in terms of cyber hygiene of the individual. And so that's one of the interesting things about unlocking smart cities around the world. There's a lot of it is a technological story, but a good part of it is also a human story, meaning that we have to have people change their mindsets and their behaviors.
Right, all of those we really have to consider. And going forward, Mr. Lim, with South Korean President Moon Jae-in's rather recent announcement of South Korea's plans to continue developing smart cities, what do you think are some key takeaways and initiatives that will really help it become a leader of smart cities?
So as you mentioned, President Moon did recently make a public appearance and announcement at one of Korea's first planned smart cities called Seongdo, which is a place in Incheon. It's one of the outskirts cities of Seoul. Quite symbolic because he chose this specific area because it was kind of Korea's experiment with smart cities, or back then it was called ubiquitous city. And one of the things they did, one of their mentality back then was build it, use updated technology, world-class technology, and people will come. And that was one of the challenges of building smart cities in Seongdo. Usually you would first see the urban challenge and then resolve it, but this is kind of the other way around. However, there were some successful components to this. They focus heavily on infrastructure such as air quality sensors, traffic sensors, to something very cool like truckless garbage chutes, where the chutes are all connected, so you don't even need garbage trucks. But like I said, their mentality of kind of build it and people will come was the biggest challenge. But they learned a lot from this kind of smart city approach. Usually it's to resolve the problem first, not so much have the solution. Hopefully people will come. And also as part of this kind of initiative, the President Moon initiated the New Deal, which includes the Digital and Green New Deal, which incorporates a lot of the components of a smart city, as you could see, because it's digital, from subsidies on solar panels for renewable energy use, for private residences, funding for R&D innovation, 5Gs, the killer apps to Korea's most important data dam. So I probably mentioned this a couple of times before, it's quite famous. His vision of something called the data dam is, for smart cities, you need data from as the gentleman from Singapore mentioned, from private citizen smartphones to transactions to traffic data. This will all be kind of aggregated into one kind of compatible cloud, sort of say, and which will be run by the government because there are a lot of issues with privates and cybersecurity. So with this kind of data dam, sort of say, all the data that will be aggregated here will be able to be put into a lot of AI software, etc. Because the key for this data is compatible. So it could be used across multiple platforms because usually data is all jumbled and segregated. So with this data, he is thinking, data is the new goal. So this will propel Korea into the future to be able to kind of use data for all decision-making purposes.
So as we see all these fourth industrial revolution technologies proliferate, we can expect more and more solutions to connect us together and hopefully genuinely improve our lives. But of course, as you both mentioned, it needs to be inclusive and make sure that nobody is left behind. I'm afraid this is where we're going to have to wrap up the discussion today. But that was Andrew Lim, Trade Commissioner at the Quebec Government Office in Seoul, and Dr. Gweng-on Webb, Adjunct Fellow at Singapore's Nanyang University. Thank you both so much for your time.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
And to our viewers, as always, thank you for watching. Have a lovely day or evening wherever you are. Goodbye.